Personally, this statement will get me into trouble. I believe that every General Conference administrator who was party to that reaffirmation statement should resign immediately because they overstep their authority with catastrophic impact on the lives of innocent Adventists worldwide. I think they should resign. They no longer have our confidence.
Now, some of you might say, Henk, why are you doing this? I'm a layperson. Before I started speaking, I should have mentioned I stand nothing to gain. If anything, loss is more likely. There's literally nothing. No one's going to call me up and say, Henk, wow, you've really showed it. Why don't you come be president? It's not going to happen. I'm spending my time here. Why am I doing it? I'm spending my time at risk of consequences here. Why am I doing it? If you go on to Rumble and you watch the Liberty and Health Oceania live stream, which was presented on the 7th of September, you will know why. This couple here, they preceded my presentation. You will see this couple here. They gave their testimony. And they are the parents. Now, this is a lay pastor of the Adventist church. Their son was working at a Adventist affiliated institution. He had a medical exemption. His valid medical exemption was not recognized, and they continued with a discussion about his continued employment. And ultimately, he succumbed to the pressure and he took the therapy, and he suffered a stroke soon after. And they are the people who I now have as real examples. Previously, for me, this was a theoretical danger. Now that I've met them, I see that this is not a theoretical issue I'm discussing. This is a real danger. There are many more families who have been affected by a therapy that has been encouraged by the General Conference, a therapy that the General Conference ADCOM themselves acknowledge can have severe side effects, even death. This is not a harmless issue that we're discussing. And I've met this couple and their son, and it hurts me when I see what has happened to their healthy, energetic son who was able to flourish in society until he was compelled to take that therapy. Why am I doing this? I have children too. And I will defend my children. I will defend as many children as I can while I am here to stand up against this statement to ensure that we are restored our religious liberty. Now, for you to understand, maybe just a short story from my side. You want to know who I am. This story will tell you who I am. This is a street in Phuket, Thailand. And you can see there's some electric wiring here between these two hotels. And in my more newlywed years, I didn't have a lot of means. I've managed to come full circle. I'm back in that situation, in those circumstances. But we're renting a room in this resort hotel. And we were sleeping there one night and we heard a pop. And I said to my wife, that sounds like fire extinguishers. Now, when I was growing up, I was a bit of a naughty boy, and some of my friends were into mischief, and they would pop the fire extinguishers and spray it for fun in the schoolyard. So I knew the sound. I said, that's a fire extinguisher. I said to her, look, I don't know the safety profile of this place. You start packing. You start packing because I think we've got to get out of here. So I ran out. I came alongside. I saw one of these transformers had exploded during the night. Now, this building here, behind all the wiring, used to be a wooden building. It had a wooden facade. And that transformer that exploded had set that wood alight. It was burning. So I ran back in. I said to my wife, we've got to get our stuff and get out. There's a fire. We evacuated our room. We stood on the roadside. And we were just speaking in our mother tongue, which is Afrikaans. And suddenly a couple next to us turned around and said, oh, are you Afrikaans? And we started chatting. So there's a small message there about the Afrikaans people who are probably very alert for very good reason. And we were talking, and I said after a while to this guy, look, that fire is not going to go out. I don't hear a fire alarm. Oh, what are we doing here? And that guy said, yeah, somebody should go in there and tell them. Well, I'll tell you, there was no one else. I turned around, I charged back into that hotel. I came to the front lobby. I asked the guy, where's your alarm? Alarm's not working. I said, this hotel is going to burn down. We've got to evacuate. He agreed. I said, mate, do you have a guest list? We've got to evacuate the hotel. There's people in these rooms. He doesn't have a guest list. I said, I'm going to go door to door, mate. I started running up into that hotel. I'm hammering on doors. People are evacuated. I'm getting them out. One of the doors I hammer on, inside is a guy, a Russian guy. Russian guys are used to having to act tough and being tough. He opens the door. He wants to fight me. Luckily, I am of higher stature than most men. So once the door was open, he wasn't so confident about his chances. He doesn't understand a word of English. I'm saying, fire, get your stuff, get out. Luckily, his son was sleeping in another room, and his son must have watched Western media. He understood the word fire. He starts crying. The dad starts to figure out there's a problem here. He grabs his family, his elder son in the other room. They run. I go up. I come to the last door in that hotel, just beneath where this fire is burning. That's the very top of the hotel. That's the roof of the hotel. They have the room immediately underneath that. I knock, nothing opens. I knock. I say to the guy, mate, I'm going to kick this door down. I kick the door. Suddenly the door opens. Out peers a face. I say, you've got to get your stuff and get out. These people grab their gear. They run. It is a mother, a father. It's their 3 children and grandmother and grandfather. 3 generations in one room. They run. We evacuate that hotel. I get out. The next morning we went in to see what happened. The fire brigade was useless. They show up with flip-flops. They don't have boots. They don't want to go near the fire. They're lobbing the flame with a hose pipe. It was a disaster. That hotel burned down. This is my room the next morning. Above this, it looks worse. This is as far as we could get in. The upper floors were completely consumed. Now, why do I tell this story? I feel the same about this issue, this statement. No one is warning people about this danger. And I'm sorry, I just have that responsibility in me that when I see people facing harm and danger, I feel compelled to warn them. And that's why I've taken this upon me. I am rushing into this church and I am pleading with you, get out. There's a fire. I'm not saying leave the church. I'm saying get out of this statement. Like the Russian guy, there are pastors and administrators in this church who assume they always have the moral high ground. And when I approach with this issue, they think I'm antagonistic to the church. They want to fight me. I'm not your enemy. I'm telling you, we've got to get this statement out, sort it out. And many of them, once they have received the full picture, once they've started to actually listen and not try to dismiss me, they have turned the corner. And that's why we've got an XCOM vote. The leadership was not happy with me. But once I sat them down and I explained the issue, they finally started to get it. I've gone through the same exercise with another conference, and increasingly they're going around saying they now understand what I'm warning about and they're supporting that this statement needs to go. I'm telling you, please, we need to get people out of the burning building. This statement has already harmed many. We cannot afford more harm. So with that, I just want to plead with you again, email me, get the materials, and may God bless you all as we seek to save our fellow members in the church. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow. And then you had this for 2 years. God's timing is perfect. God's timing is perfect. But wow, this presentation, I'm a hubby student, has been so enlightening and so educational. And, you know, it's that creeping compromise. It's that speaking out of both sides of the mouth. And it's done in such an eloquent way that you believe it. And if you aren't educated, if you just, like how you said your mom read it and she's like, what's wrong with it? She didn't quite see it. Because you have to be intentionally looking for the deception, right? You have to be aware and on high alert. And this is very wowing. And it's like, there's these chills that I have because I'm like, what would my church say? How would my church respond? How would that go? What would they say? And what I really appreciate about this presentation is that you've answered all the questions too.
I know.
You not only gave
3
the
years
education.
of hard study.
Yeah. But you've answered the questions that we would come up with. You've answered those statements. You've covered all bases. So the only thing a person can do is literally put on blinders and say, I refuse. They couldn't, in good judgment, with a good question that you haven't answered, not push forward this educational, biblical stance against leadership who is not standing on the Bible alone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also, Brother Henk. I also love the spirit of the message and also how balanced it was. While there is a love for your church, there's also concerns about certain things. Having listened to this presentation now has doubled my respect for Dr. Conrad Vine's position even more. I now better understand what he was really trying to do when he said the things that he said, which has caused an outrage, but in a good way. It's just that these issues need to be addressed. And listening to this has really opened my eyes because I'm like, I didn't realize it was this bad. It's like, whoa. I knew it was bad. We know that the dragon is wroth with the woman, went to make war with the remnant of her seeds. We know Satan is attacking God's church. But when you see it in principle, it's like it brings me to a place where I'm like, okay, we really got to fight. Not in our own spirit, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, save the Lord. But we do have to fight now. Like, we have to fight back. And I also want to say, I love the fact you are not calling for division. I've heard people using this situation to create greater division, to separate and bring confusion, and to create distrust among the members of the church, which I'm like, I don't think that's the solution either. So I'm really glad that you balanced that in a way that you did. So thank you.
Wow, yeah, and I really appreciate and want to. Oh, go ahead.
If I can just comment on that, for me, removing the statement is not going to prevent anyone from partaking of the therapy. It's the same as an X-ray. The way to understand the therapy is it is any technology. No technology is in and of itself moral. A technology is amoral. If you use it for bad purposes, that is immoral. If you use it for good purposes, then that's moral. The same with this therapy. It is naive to think that a General Conference AdCom can come out and pronounce a technology and elevate it to something holy that is always moral. And that's the frustration. Removing the statement doesn't mean you can't partake of the therapy. That remains at your discretion. Just act in harmony with your conscience. But the problem is you're not even allowed to discuss this statement. People get very emotional because somehow the default position has been established that the church must be encouraging it, which that is a lie. And that's really the point I'm trying to get across. The default position is actually the church should remain silent. That is the biblical position. That's the Ellen White position. Remain silent. And then you'll find we won't be fighting over the therapy because you can do as you please, or I can choose to reject it. And that is the way to unite the church, is take the statement out. The church is united because we're back on the fundamentals.
No, and that's what's so key. It's not just that therapy. It is anything, anything. And when you take it from that position, that's when you recognize It's this thing in 2020. It'll be the next thing next year. It'll be the next thing in a few months. And as you continue to allow these things to have a power that doesn't belong, if you continue to do that, then we're looking at it gets deeper, right? It just becomes more. It just goes for anything. This just happened to be that particular thing. And like you said, it's the conscience. I have a family member who was fired from her job and she worked for an SDA hospital, and she was fired because she didn't do that. And that created such a whirlwind in there. I mean, there were so many different factors, from having to move, from so many, I mean, it was a whirlwind. And the fights going back and forth with just saying, I am allowed to have my conscience in this, and my conscience doesn't state for me that I can get this. And it just was such a sad situation. I fortunately, and I love what you said too, write your own. I wrote my own because my conscience, I could not do it. I talked to other people in the healthcare profession, just saying that there's not enough evidence for me to say that I feel comfortable with this. And I warned people, and I said, just because you don't have a negative impact now, it could come in the future. There's just not enough study. It's too fast, too quick. The promotion of it just did not sit well with me. I don't judge people who got it, in the sense of I tried to educate them from my minimal level of education, and just knowing that this was too quick, too fast, and this isn't your first solution to combat anything. You know, our rule is start low, go slow. Prevention is key. That's what I was taught, right? And that's what we want to focus on. And I appreciate that. Go ahead.
I just want to comment here as well. I see a few of the comments coming in, and people are saying, the church can't remain silent. The church needs to rebuke the current therapy. And look, if there was no official statement, I think there would be greater freedom for us to have that discussion. And don't think that when I'm saying the church should remain silent. Now, I'm back to the point. The Bible does not condemn this therapy. The Bible, Ellen White does not condemn the therapy. So let's not make unreasonable expectations of the church. If the church can't speak based on science in favor of it, I respect, at least theoretically, the position that the church can't speak based on science against it. So I just want to say that for all your followers. Personally, I didn't take it. I researched the matter. I'm very clear that this particular therapy required the word to be redefined. That's another issue, that this official statement didn't keep up with the maintenance required. Both herd immunity and vaccination had to be redefined to accommodate what we've just been through. That's another problem with basing on peer-reviewed science. The meaning of the language changes. So let's just deal with that first. Let's get that out the way. And then we can have a more unbiased discussion in the church about the therapy, because you'll find it's not always, they try and play the trick. All immunization is fine. And then they push you into the other corner that no immunization is fine, and that creates that division. Whereas I'm saying, if we can have the unbiased discussion, things will be very different. Then we can actually say, okay, maybe, some technologies were fine, some technologies are too experimental for them to remain fine. And at the end of the day, some of them are harmful. I asked Ted Wilson, the swine flu therapy, it was pulled from the market after 50 deaths, but it's still called that therapy by name, and therefore they still encourage it, technically. I said, do you understand the fallacy of that? Something that needs to be tested is inherently dangerous till proven acceptably safe. So I just want to let your viewers know, it's not that I'm saying, if there's a really dangerous therapy that's harming people, we should remain silent. We should just ensure that when the church speaks based on the Bible. You're then also freer to have your opinion, to engage with your fellow members and say, look, I think this particular therapy is problematic for us. So don't think that I'm here compromising. I'm just trying to be discipline to sola scriptura. Now, I do want to add one point. When it comes to the idea of the therapy, nowhere in the Bible do I see support for knowingly infecting yourself with sin or knowingly infecting yourself with something that's unclean. So I do think the bias is probably we need a whole rethink of this therapy. But that's my opinion. Let's research it from the
Very
Bible, and if
biblical.
it needs to be a belief, let's establish it. But for now, let's just get this out of the way so that we can have beliefs